So welcome to the second section of our discussion, and today we were talking about the nutrient cycle in the ocean ecosystem. Our guest in studio is a marine expert, Mr. Michael Lestakov. And so from our previous discussion, we were being told about the carbon and actually the nitrogen cycle. So maybe we can continue from where we left. You were talking about the cycles, the components of the cycle in the ocean. So are there others still remaining?
Yeah, there are the nitrogen and other nutrients.
Okay, maybe you can continue with nitrogen and the other nutrients.
Thank you. So when it comes to nitrogen, nitrogen is a major component mainly for plants and also animals which require or are in need of protein. Nitrogen exists in the ocean in the form of nitrates and nitrites. And nitrogen does not exist alone as a component because it is a plant requirement majorly. It exists with other components like phosphorus. So the level of nitrogen, just as in the normal world, nitrogen circulates from the atmosphere majorly. But now in the ocean, nitrogen is mainly from various components within the sea. Basically, the main source of nitrogen is the fixation from the atmosphere, which leads to the abundance of nitrogen in the sea. Just as oxygen, nitrogen also decreases with depth. The requirement of nitrogen being, it's a major requirement in plant and other components that exist with nitrogen as phosphorus, which exists in form of phosphate. They are being required by plants, and these plants exist in the shallow zones of the ocean. So nitrogen will be found abundant where they are required, and the excesses will be stored deep within the ocean floor. So nitrogen cycle has not that much, but it's a major requirement within the sea in terms of plants and also in animals in the need of protein. When it comes to phosphates, phosphates helps in the growth of those sea plants. And so being a requirement, it's utilized more. It's utilized more at the surface by those plants that require it before it gets deeper. Yeah. And then from nitrogen, we've got the salt cycle. Now salt, just as I had reiterated earlier, there is the movement of waters from the inland, rivers, streams, and such kinds of salt in the ocean is still the major things we discussed about carbon. But now here, salt comes from the dissolution of organic minerals containing salt by the groundwater. And the groundwater will always seep and find its way either to the ocean directly or to the inland waters like rivers and lakes. So this salty water will be later transported into the sea with the salt content it has. It will be emptied into the sea. And so that will be stabilizing the salt components in the water. And apart from that, we also have the organisms, because sea organisms eat plants that grow in the sea, and these plants have salt components. So the saltiness will be imparted into the organism or will be assimilated into the organism. And in the case of death of both the animal and the plant, the salt will be returned back to the sea. And we also have the long time, the components in the ocean which contain salt, the major nutrients like chlorides and sulfates. They take a longer time period to be removed or to be decomposed to outside the sea compared to the resident time, that is. The resident time is higher. Like, for example, the sulfates could take up to over 100 million years to be taken out of the water. So, like, for you to take a gram of sulfate out of the ocean water, it takes a lot of years compared to the inlets. Yeah, so that is majorly on the salt cycle.
Maybe you can also, because you've mentioned the cycles that are being involved, maybe you can also tell us what are some of the roles of this cycle in the ocean ecosystem and maybe in the biodiversity at large?
Thank you. So, majorly, these cycles ensure the stability of the ocean in the first step. Because, like, without carbon cycle, there will be no production, primary production in the ocean. Without oxygen, there will be no respiration. Without nitrogen and phosphates or phosphorus, there will be no plant growth. And without salt, there will be no survival of some organisms which require that salt. So the major contribution of these cycles, for example, let's say the carbon cycle, will ensure the climate of the earth is regulated, because being the ocean is a major carbon sink. It will absorb a lot of carbon, leading to reduction of carbon concentration in the atmosphere. And as we all know, carbon affects the climate through global warming, because when carbon is embedded in the atmosphere, it leads to greenhouse effect, and as a result, the global warming. So when it is stored there, it is unless there is something that disrupts it from the oceanic floor, it will not be released. And on the oxygen, it ensures the stability of the organisms in the ocean. And also to ensure the quality, because the basic quality of water is measured by the amount of dissolved gases inside that water. And oxygen, being a main gas component, is a major requirement in the ocean. So when it is there, it ensures that the biodiversity in the ocean is sustained. We do not, that does not dispute the fact that there are organisms which have low oxygen requirements, but they still need oxygen. Yeah, and concerning the salt one, it ensures the stabilization of the ocean environment, because salt also plays a role in the ocean pH. The salinity plays a role in the ocean pH. Because, for example, the ocean pH currently is 7.8. 7.8 is considered basic. Yeah. And the basicity is measured by the amount of dissolved minerals in that water. Let's say most of the minerals or the salinity will be measured by, let's say, chlorides. The chlorides will also play a major impact when it comes to determining the ocean pH. Yeah.
Okay, and so currently the environment is like a dynamic village. Everything is changing. So I also understand that the ocean ecosystem, being part of the environment, it's also undergoing through maybe the negative changes. And so maybe you can just talk about the effects or what human is doing towards the ocean ecosystem. What are some of the things that are affecting the nutrient cycling generally today?
Thank you. When it comes to the various impacts, there are the natural, which are very rare to occur, but the main ones are majorly anthropogenic. And the anthropogenic causes result from majorly the burning of fossil fuel, which offsets the geological time period of carbon. And when the geological time period of carbon is offset, the amount of carbon concentration in the ocean will be high. And when the ocean is, the concentration will be high, most of the carbon will remain embedded in the atmosphere. And this will result to global warming. When there is global warming, it also affects the water by it leads to the melting of the polar ice. And when the polar ice melts, it leads to high water content, which will lead to dilution. And when the ocean water gets diluted, salt cycle is affected. And besides that, it will lead to high water rise, which will also somehow affect most of the marine biodiversity, because like there are organisms which dwell at the intertidal zone. There are those which dwell in the deep sea. There are those which are used to many waters. There are those which are used to shallow waters. So when the level of water increases in the sea, most of these organisms, which are the intertidal organisms, they will be affected, and most of them will be dying or will be pushed to extinction. And also most of the food production will be affected, because when there is a lot of water, the level of sunlight penetration will be low, and so there will be no form of primary production. And this will affect the food webs in the ocean, and also will also affect even us as human beings, because we also rely on fish as a meal. There will be no adequate fish in the sea. So it will affect the dynamic system, majorly the food web in the ocean and the food chain in the mainland. And this will also lead to some economic effects, which we all know, like when fish reduces, there are those people who love or who earn income from exports, and also mainly from fish being sold locally. So it will be affected. And also the nutrition factor, because most sicknesses, they will advise you take fish, take this kind of fish, this kind of organism, this kind of food. So you know, when the level or the production of fish is offset, this nutrition factor will also be offset.
Okay, so maybe you can just face the camera and give a final word to the viewers about the nutrient cycling in the ocean, and maybe you can even advocate for how they can take part in conservation in the sector of the ocean ecosystem.
Thank you so much. Now, to our viewers, the ocean is as very integral as any other environment that needs to be conserved and managed. Because when we do not conserve the ocean or manage the resources within the ocean, even ourselves will be affected by our own actions. So to the advice, maybe in terms of conservation and management practices, as in the major parts of conservation, every individual has a role to play. And it begins at an individual level, that every one of us needs to take a part in making our environment be a better place. Because, like, for example, I gave an example on global warming. When global warming happens, and ocean acidification will also happen as a result of majorly the global warming, there will be decolorization of fish, and this decolorization of fish will lead to low quality fish, meaning the quality of the fish you are supposed to be taking will be altered. That will mean your nutrition is also affected. And majorly, we need to always dump and learn to recycle some of these products, like let's say the plastics and the rest. We need to learn how to make use of them in an environmentally friendly way, such that they don't upset the ocean environment. And also in the ocean areas, we need to also take part as an individual, be consumed with a passion to make it an environment that is worth that even you yourself can be proud of being there, because we also use the ocean to swim. So if we do not conserve it, even our swimming will be affected, and our tourism, the money we gain from tourism will be affected. So we need to take part and parcel of the community, even in the global community, in the global spheres. We need to integrate this into all our systems, that conservation is key in anything concerning environment, and every environment is a key to conservation.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. And to our viewer, thank you so much once again for staying tuned to Champions TV. Until next time, may you have a nice evening.